welcome to today's Tiny Tune-Up. Today we're going to be talking about the 4 most common injuries and pain that I work with. Now, I work with lots of different kinds of injuries, but there are some that pop up more than others, and there seem to be 4 that really, pretty much at least daily or weekly, I hear at least one of these issues inquired about. So I'm going to tell you right off the bat what they are, and then I'm going to give you a little tip for each one of them. And we're also going to be talking about what each one of these has in common. Hey, I see somebody watching. If you're there, say hello. I think I can see the comments this week. Last week I was having some technical difficulties, but I'm ready to see comments. So if you're there, say hello. If you're watching on replay, say #replay. And if you have questions, post them to the comments, and I'll be able to answer you in real time. So let's get to the big reveal, the 4 most common injuries that I see. I will list them from least to most. The first one that I'm going to say, the least most of the 4 most common, might be a surprise to some of you. It is plantar fasciitis / other foot issues. Usually if there's other foot issues, there's something related to the plantar fascia as well. So plantar fasciitis is becoming increasingly common, and I have people ask me about this either online or contacting me directly at least once a week. So that's the first one I want to mention. The next one that is super common are the hips. Hip pain is very, very, very common. And what I want to say about those two, the hips and the feet, is they are directly related. Now, not all foot issues will lead to hip pain, but if there is a foot issue, there is most likely something going on inside of the hip. So the second one that I see a lot of that I'm listing is the hips. The next one, and this might not be a surprise, this is probably the second most common that I see, is low back pain. Low back pain is something people talk about all the time, whether it's chronic, whether it's intermittent, whatever, everyone has it sometimes. And then the most common reason that people come to me, the most common issue for pain and injury that I see is tech neck. And that includes a lot of things. That includes neck pain, shoulder pain, jaw pain, all of that is lumped together. So I'm going to reiterate the 4 most common things that I see, and this is not by any means a comprehensive list. This is not scientifically, I did not collect data on this, but what I hear people ask me the most is plantar fasciitis, hip issues, low back issues, and neck and shoulder issues. Now, let's talk about what all 4 of these things have in common, as well as other injuries. What they all have in common is they are all caused by something that you're doing. Not to say it's your fault, but it's something to do with the way that you are moving that is causing this imbalance that leads eventually to pain and restriction. So it's actually empowering when you realize that it's something that you're doing, because if it's something you're doing, then it's something that you could also not be doing, right? So once you recognize what it is, then you can start the process of sort of replacing less optimal patterns with more optimal patterns that support the function of your body. So when we talk about these 4 different injuries, these 4 different causes of pain, we talk about how it has something to do with your movement patterns. I always ask people that come to me, because when they come to me, they've usually tried a lot of different things by the time they get to me. They've tried PT, they've tried surgery, they've tried medication. What I always ask them is, has anyone talked to you about the relationship of said body part to the other surrounding body part? So if someone's like, oh, I have plantar fasciitis, I've been dealing with this for 5 years, and I say, has anyone talked to you about the relationship between your foot and your hip, or your foot and your knee and your hip? And I think I've never had somebody say yes. I don't think I've ever had someone say yes. I've been educated in that. So that's where I come in. So we in the work that I do, we look at the relationship of structure and function. Now, structure always rules function. That is not to say that functionality can't influence structure. So say you have a sort of kind of strange movement pattern going on that puts stress on a certain body part, that can affect your structure. That can break down bone, that can create bulging discs, that can create all kinds of misalignments. But ultimately, your structure is going to determine what your function is. So once you can identify where your structure may have a missing link, an imbalance, something that's not as stable as it could be, something that doesn't have the sound infrastructure that it needs to have to perform a certain action. Once you start to recognize that, then you can start to build from the ground up. And that will eventually lead to better function, which then leads to less pain. So it sounds kind of very layered, which it is, and it is a process, but it's actually a super, super simple process. So let's take the examples that we have today. We're going to start with the example of plantar fasciitis. So the function part of this is that typically when there is inflammation in the foot, in the plantar fascia of the foot, or even other things like neuromas or bunions, things that are caused by impact and strain, we look at the relationship of how the shin bones line up into the ankle joint, how the ankle extends out into the foot, and how all of that relates up the leg to the knee and the hip, and even up into the pelvis. So one thing that you can do, this is your quick tip for plantar fasciitis, if you're someone that has plantar fasciitis pain, that has tried everything, or if it's new and you don't know where to start, the first thing you want to do is find out where are you unstable? Where are you unstable? Where are things not lining up properly? So the very first thing you can do, this is your first layer that you would peel back. I'm going to stand up here so you can see just my feet. Make sure I can be in the frame there. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is just let your legs drop underneath of your hips and figure out where your weight is. So do you feel like your feet are kind of sort of collapsing in and your weight is more on your big toe and sort of on that inner line of your arch, or do you feel like you have weight more right down the center of the foot, or are you kind of out here? So you can just, first off, your gut instinct, you can just look and kind of see what's going on there. Now, once you notice visually, you can do a few things, just basic little stretches, go up into releve or up on the balls of your feet, and notice where that weight distributes. Are you really just on that big toe, or are you really on the outside? Figure out where your weight is. Now, here's where the little kind of reference point comes in. So if you have a Yamana black ball, or actually for this particular exercise, you could use a few different types of objects. It doesn't necessarily have to be a black Yamana ball. You don't want something as small as a tennis ball, probably. You might even be able to use a small pillow for this. So you can take that, I'm going to use the example of the ball. So you can take that ball right between your ankles. So I don't know if you can kind of see how it's sort of at the front of my heel, right at the beginning of the arch. And I'm kind of lifting my foot up so that that ball is providing some support for my arch. And once you have that ball or similar object wedged between your feet, now find your whole foot on the floor. Try those releves again and see if you can hold on to the ball. If you cannot, if you're wobbling around and the ball falls out, or all your weight goes on one foot, or you feel like this is a sort of precarious situation, then it starts to give you information. You're collecting data, right? You can start to see, oh, well, the inside of my foot might be collapsing, so that must mean that the outside of my leg is not providing the support that it should. So you're starting to kind of gather these clues, and that's what can then lead you to understanding how to actually troubleshoot your aches and pains. So that's your first tip for the plantar fasciitis. Now, moving up the body, the second sort of most common thing that I see, the hip pain. And again, hips and feet are directly related. So someone can have hip pain without foot pain and vice versa, but there's always going to be some kind of imbalance between those 2 points, even if the person's not aware of it. So for hip pain, now hip pain is pretty broad. It can refer to lots of sort of different angles of the hip, because we have the outside of the hip, we have the front of the hip, we have all the way back here the back of the hip, and we have, of course, the inner edge of the hip. So the hip is where the thigh bone inserts into the pelvis. So you can kind of get at it from any angle, and also any point in that joint can cause pain. So one of the first things you can do, again, this is sort of like you're beginning to understand your structure, first phase of the process, is, again, take a black ball. And this time I do recommend the 2 Yamana black balls. They're exactly the right density and pressure for the bone stimulation and the reorganizing of the joint that we are trying to get here. So what you're going to do is lie on your back. You can do this in bed, you can do this on the floor. 1 ball each. Place your feet on the floor, lift your pelvis, find your hip joints. If you don't know where that is, I'll talk a little more in detail about that in a minute. But essentially, if you know where your sit bones are, the bones that press into the floor when you're sitting or into the chair, my ball boy, you know where your sit bones are. you bring your hand right to the outside of those sit bones, and that's going to be somewhere in your hip joint. So once you have found those points, you can let your legs stretch out if it's comfortable to do so. You can keep them bent too if you need to. And now you have, again, this reference point sort of wedged inside of your hip joint, and the idea is that it's starting to create space in there and dislodge the muscle tension that's sort of living in there, all the gunk that gets stuck in there. So it's another example of structure, rolling function. Once we can sort of reorganize the structure, create more space in there, then the functional piece, the muscles, can start to actually relax and unwind. The ones that might be doing more work than they should start to get the message that they can calm down. The ones that have been out to lunch because the other ones are picking up the slack, well, those can start to wake up and actually be stimulated. So you can stay like this for a while, or you can even put the bottoms of your feet together and let your knees fall open. The balls go deeper into the joints. Now that joint is fairly tall and skinny, for lack of a better description. So I started down here, but you can play around with moving them up higher in the hip joint, a little lower, until you find your sweet spot. Once you find your sweet spot, you can hang out as long as you want. You can stay here 20 minutes, more if you want. You could do just a minute is great as well. Just a minute is just enough to kind of get that information to start processing. So that's the first thing that I do with people when they have hip pain, as long as they can go into that external sort of rotation, to start to bring awareness to the structure so that we can then start to work on the function. Okay, the third one, moving again up the body, not going very far up this time, we're going to go into low back. So low back pain is super common. Gosh, every day I'm hearing people talk about low back pain. So, you sit at a desk, you drive, even if you're super active, there's oftentimes a lot of compression into that curve of the low back. So I could go on and on and on about this. I'm going to try to keep it really simple. Usually low back pain, people are talking about the area of their SI joints, the place where your so-called butterfly wings actually meet your sacrum. I guess it would be helpful to have a visual of that. So, usually there is some sort of restriction or tightness in this area here, right where these panels of your pelvis actually meet the lower part of your spine. So because that usually is an issue of there could be adhesion there could be one side that's pushed more forward than the other, lots of different causes. But one thing that you can do is start to realign that and start to lengthen the lower back. So we actually, when someone comes to me and they're like, I have low back pain, I don't know what to do, very first thing I do is I stick a ball in their belly and lie them down on that. So let me show you what I mean. This can be done with a pearl or gold. I would not recommend this with a silver ball. It's a little too intense. Definitely do not do this with any other type of ball besides the almond ball. So what I would do is I would just place the ball somewhere around the pubic bone, maybe a little bit higher. And if they have trouble sort of supporting themselves, you can put a pillow underneath your chest, underneath your belly. And you just let the ball start to press into the front of the pelvis, which opens up the back of the pelvis. Once you get comfortable here, this is pretty intense if you've never done this. Once you're comfortable, you can stretch out over the ball and just kind of tuck your pelvis for a breath so that you can feel that lengthening right in the lower back. And again, you could stay here for 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. There's all kinds of things you can do once you get deeper in here. Again, I'm not going to go into all that. I could literally probably talk for hours about this. So that'll be where I end it for now. But that is one thing that you can do to assess your structure, the function is more optimal. So those are the first three. The last one, tech neck, I'm going to show you 5 days worth of focus material of things you can do to help relieve your tech neck. So I'm going to save that. I'm not going to give a little tip today because I have volumes of information about tech neck that I'm going to share with you in just a couple of weeks. So please, if you're interested in learning about that, please join me for my free focus series, Check Your Tech Neck, starting October 4th through the 8th, 1 p.m. every day live, but you can watch it anytime on replay, so you don't have to be there in person. But it is literally like stacked with information about how to relieve jaw tension, neck pain, headaches, shoulder pain, stuck in this forward head posture position, all of that stuff. If you want to join us for this, please go to my website, reeniviola.com/techneck, to sign up, and that is the list that I will use for the workbook that accompanies the class. So please share this information with others if you think this would resonate with them. Share this video with them if you'd like. Invite them into the group so that they can access the TechNet class. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for being here. Love all around. See you soon. Bye.